Good evening, whakaalofalahiatu, and welcome to tonight's bulletin of BCN News. Leading the news tonight, Premier Honourable Dalton Tagilangi expressed his disappointment at the organisation and the turnout of the first day of the National Summit held at the scenic Matavai yesterday. Here's more. Premier Dalton Tagilangi expressed his disappointment at the organisation and the turnout on the first day of the National Summit yesterday. The Premier's disappointment was apparent when he stood up for his speech and there were many empty seats in the room. He delivered his speech to around 30 participants, which was a very low turnout compared to last year when more than 100 participants filled out the conference room.
I just hope that everyone can see what we're trying to do here. And we have encouraged and we've been helping and we've been supporting all the way, and this is what we get. It's not good enough. Let me say that. The importance of this is the lead on from those that left for us. The previous governments, what they're looking at, the Niue Gehemunuena, the prosperous Niue. It's not just there. It was there for a purpose, to achieve that. We got 5 years to go. On that strategic plan that we're looking at. And last year, we're halfway. We should have learned something and we should have improved this year. But let me say, I haven't seen much improvement. Someone can prove me wrong. There is corporate plans in place. There is reports that has been written. But it's all about telling us things that we already know. I fought the meeting last year for people to be innovative, come up with new initiatives and the like. We're still on the same platform from year in, year out. Just waiting for cabinet. What are you doing? What are your vision? And they just follow. We have vision, but as you all know, vision comes with money. Let's move away from that, given the lessons that we learned from the COVID and others, and try and diversify in other means of prosperous, for now, while we dealt with COVID. And I think we have managed it well. We have been on almost 2 years, a year and a half now. And thank God that COVID is still there. I'm not sure if you all remember when was our first summit, what month, what date. That I spoke in this very same room and give you the directions of your new government that had only just started as of last year. We set ourselves timeline, we set ourselves a high bar that we need to be achieved. We talked about it in cabinet. We remind ourselves we're over a year, we only got a year and a half to go in our term. And it's sad that we go, and there's nothing happened. I think the mentality of the public servants is it's okay. We'll weather it out. They'll come, they'll go. Yes, our job is the people that give us that job. You're the lucky ones, you're public service. But I tell you what, I'm seriously reviewing and then acting on all of those laws that's in place that have never been enforced. And a lot of those things that we need to do, that the ministers are working hard, is trying to realign all these policies and all these other things that it's already in place, but was never actioned or never enforced. It's time that we wake up to ourselves and start helping ourselves instead of relying on handouts.
The chairperson of the Public Service Commission, Ida Talangi Hekesi, also expressed her disappointment at the last-minute arrangements for what is a very important national summit. However, she says she is looking forward to seeing some innovative decisions going forward.
What I'm looking for in the session today and I suppose tomorrow is the innovative ideas that that's going to come out from all the different ministries. We're all up against the wall with finance, and so we have to think innovatively of how we're going to go forward.
Also, there is the New Zealand High Commissioner, Her Excellency Helen Tana. The New Zealand government is the largest donor of the Niue Public Service.
We're really interested in the ideas moving forward, and as the Premier has said, what are the ideas for economic recovery for Niue as well, but beyond that also to development of the public service, development to an outlook. One of the things we talk a little bit about is the tourism impact, for example, on revenues here. Yes, it has collapsed, of course, and that's made life very difficult here, but it will come back. So how do you build a short-term revenue stream while waiting or planning for the recovery of tourism, which at the end of the day brings in very, very significant revenue for Niue, and will do again, and it will help fund your social services and your conditions moving forward. I'd like to hear a little bit about how, say, the agriculture, the tourism, how they can coexist. So how do we build a sustainable future that sees environmental standards maintained, it sees health standards maintained, while providing the opportunities across all of the economic sectors as well. Just picking up on a theme also that the Premier talked about in terms of the provision of advice to ministers. That's something we do a lot of training on in the public service in New Zealand, and it's something either perhaps we can have a talk about in terms of adjusting to providing options, for example, to our ministers. So not waiting for direction. You might have a direction around the strategic idea that the ministers want to work in, but then providing options on how you achieve that. So one of the things at the moment that we must do as a public service in New Zealand is provide options. So A, B or C, different ways of achieving the end result that the ministers can then make their decisions about what best suits Niue or the government moving forward.
On the first panel was the director of the University of the South Pacific, Niue campus, Sione Lolesio, who suggested the establishment of an independent economic think tank. Not a new idea, as it was also suggested at last year's summit. However, Mr. Lolesio, who is an economist and lecturer at the university, also offered to undertake training workshops for senior public servants on risk-based assessments. One of the other issues raised was the productivity levels of the government's workforce. The director of the Taonga Niue department, Moira Enetama, posed the question whether the government should consider returning to the 5-day week instead of the 4-day week. Ms. Enetama said that given the financial situation of the government, wouldn't it make sense to return to a 5-day week so that there is more time for the government agencies to generate revenue? Premier Dalton Tagilangi told the senior government officials on the first day of the National Summit yesterday that it is their role to drive government's vision of a prosperous Niue and not to depend or wait for Cabinet to make every decision.
In my term, in my experience as a minister, I haven't seen anyone that come up to me and said, Premier, let's try it this way. Can we do this? Can we do that? They always sit and wait and see what that comes out of Cabinet. So I encourage you, forget about when you talk about money. That's our job, to find money to support what you have in your vision to drive your own ministries. And I think that is the key and the challenge for you going forward for the next 12 months. I don't want to come back next year because I relied on your input, your views on how we can further develop this country going forward. We already have ours, but we're not sharing with you, otherwise it would not happen because we didn't get the support. And this is a good example of it. I can put a good thing up on the board, but if you're not with it, we're not helping it, that's a waste of time.
A young man requiring urgent medical attention was on a Medivac flight yesterday afternoon to New Zealand. It's understood the 25-year-old was injured during the second game of the Niue Rugby League Test Series on Saturday last week. The air ambulance landed at about midday to take the critically ill young man who was accompanied by his parents. It's understood he underwent emergency surgery over the weekend, but his condition hadn't improved. It was decided to send for medical evacuation. The young man's injuries have raised questions about the game of rugby league on the island, with allegations of deliberate hard tackles during the first two games between Tafisi and Motu. BCN News reached out to the president of New Rugby League, Zach Smith, who said that it's an unfortunate injury and their thoughts are foremost with their player and his family at this time. Zach Smith says it's never anyone's intention when playing contact sports like rugby league to deliberately injure another player, but the nature of the game is that it is a rough game. The first game of the 3-test series in October was a draw between the Tafisi and Motu, but the Northerners' North Motu team took out the second test last Saturday, 20-18 against the Southerners' Tafisi. And if you missed this news earlier this week, the government will not be reducing the number of MIQ days from 13 to 10 until next year, and definitely not on the next flight on Monday as previously reported. The government is also expected to roll out the booster shots of the Pfizer vaccine next year for those who have already taken their first 2 jabs. Acting Secretary to Government and Director General of Health and the Ministry of Social Services, Gayleen Tasmania, confirmed this last week on News of the Week program. The government will also be using the Ocean View wing of the scenic Matawai for passengers coming on next Monday's flight. The passengers on that flight will leave MIQ on Sunday, December 12, and the scenic Matawai will then be able to commence their Christmas season events and bookings for the duration of the festive season. According to Mrs. Tasmania, the government is trying to bring home the many passengers waiting in Auckland, and some of these passengers booked their travel as early as July and August this year. Mrs. Tasmania also confirmed the government's plans to provide booster shots for the local population in the new year. However, they are waiting on the New Zealand government for confirmation on when Niue's allocation of the booster shots will be available sometime next year. The representatives of the private sector from the Chamber of Commerce and the 14 village councils took their issues to the government officials at the NGO symposium held earlier this week. A consultation meeting was organised to hear the views of the non-government organisations. According to the organiser of the meeting, Frank Sioneholo, most of the village council representatives want the government to review their annual grant of $10,000 for the village councils. There are also concerns at the reporting requirements, with the councillors asking for more flexibility. Representing the Avasali Village Council is their chairperson, Hetutu Tamahetutu, who said that he was very pleased with the meeting. The feedback was an indication that the organisations in attendance appreciate the opportunity to share their experiences and their concerns. Hetutu said that in the past the NGOs was mainly the village councils, but there are now many more groups, so it is a good idea to meet and hold the NGO symposium annually. The Chief Executive Officer of the Chamber of Commerce, Catherine Papani, shared the concerns of the business community, especially the struggles and ongoing issues of late payments by government of business invoices. She said that one of the businesses mentioned waiting weeks and another said that they had to wait 8 months to receive payment. While not a new issue, the Chamber of Commerce is concerned that these businesses are struggling with cash flow, and the government delaying payments just makes it even tougher for businesses to survive, especially during these COVID times. Mrs. Papani also raised the concerns at the lack of due process when government departments don't use the tenders process, and sometimes the government will order their goods directly from businesses overseas. The Chamber of Commerce is the secretariat of the Cabinet-appointed Tenders Board, but according to Mrs. Papani, only a very few departments use the tender process. Catherine Papani says that the Chamber of Commerce will continue to work with the government going forward, especially with work on sustainable development and options and possibilities of public-private partnerships. 135 out of a total of 141 children, 12 to 15-year-olds on the island took their second jab of the Pfizer vaccine last Friday. 5 of those children had just turned 12 over the last few weeks, so they took their first shot. Premier Dalton Tagilangi, in a statement, said that he is very pleased with this outcome of the children's vaccination rollout. The government's press release a few days ago confirmed that 98% of these children have taken their 2 jabs. Premier Dalton Tagilangi says that the government of Niue aims to continue protecting the people, including its youth, with the vaccination program, saying that the government is delighted with the 98% result. On Friday last week, Acting Secretary to Government and Director General of Health Galen Tasmania also confirmed the government's plans next year to vaccinate the 5 to 11-year-old children once the approval of the Pfizer pediatric vaccine is approved by MedSafe New Zealand. In the statement, Premier Tagilangi says that the government's priority continues to be the health and safety of the people on the island, and that they will continue to work with the New Zealand government's health authorities who have supported government's vaccination efforts. 3 weeks ago, the first Australian High Commissioner to Niue, Susan Allen, departed the island, and on the same flight, her replacement, Acting High Commissioner for Australia, Karen Murray, arrived. Here's more. Karen Murray will be acting Australian High Commissioner until January next year, when the Government of Australia will appoint their new High Commissioner to Niue. We spoke to Karen yesterday.
This is my 4th position in the Pacific. I've had postings in Nauru, then Solomon Islands, and most recently Tuvalu, where I finished earlier this year. So Susan had a wonderful time here, and when I was asked if I would fill in for a little while, I absolutely jumped at the chance. Working in the Pacific is my passion, and I really enjoy doing it. And I have travelled extensively through the Pacific, so yeah, I can't wait to be here and get to know as many people as I can and enjoy the festivities around Christmas time.
Acting High Commissioner Murray says that she will continue with the work from the previous High Commissioner to ensure the smooth running of the Australian-funded projects on the island, as well as supporting Australian citizens who may need help travelling to Australia.
Well, I'm, keeping the post going and making sure any Australians here have all the support they need if they want to travel to Australia, and looking at what I can do to advance our aid program here. We do some work in different areas around the island, so I'm interested in making sure that is proceeding smoothly and Niue is getting the support that it needs. So for Australian citizens who are fully vaccinated, the border is now open. Quarantine varies depending on which state that you want to be in. So you can quarantine-free travel in New South Wales, Victoria and the ACT, but for states like Queensland and WA, there's different varieties of requirements that are needed.
And for locals who are looking to visit your family and friends in Australia over the next few weeks or within the festive season, you can contact the Acting Australian High Commissioner to help you out, especially with the travel advisories.
Yes, because advice is changing for each state on a regular basis, so I'm happy to provide all the advice that's needed and any assistance that's needed, because you'll need a international COVID certificate, digital certificate, so if you can't do that on your own, I'm more than happy to give you a hand.
And speaking of travelling, if you're planning or your family are planning to head to New Zealand over the festive season, you will need to get a vaccine pass. In order for you to get this pass, you will have to go to the Niue Health Department first to get a letter which will have all your vaccination details in there. You will need this letter to apply for your vaccine pass. You can apply for this on New Zealand's Ministry of Health website, www.health.govt.nz, and click on My Vaccine Pass. Be mindful the process may take a few days or even weeks, so plan ahead to avoid disappointment. It is now a requirement in New Zealand that if you want to enter hospitality venues such as restaurants or access community events such as sporting events or church gatherings, then you are required to have this vaccine pass. If you're traveling further to other countries, then you will have to request or apply for an international travel vaccination certificate. All this information is available on New Zealand's Ministry of Health website. Today, November 25th, is the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. Here in Niue, it is the police department who take the lead in the awareness and promotion of the elimination of all forms of violence against women. This year, Sergeant Albert Tasmania was nominated for an international award to recognise his efforts in advancing women's issues in policing. Here's more on that story. Yesterday, Sergeant Albert Tasmania was announced as one of the finalists for the Champions of Change Award at the Australasia Council for Women and Policing's annual awards. This award recognises the efforts of men who promote the advancement of women and women's issues in policing. From the many nominations, Sergeant Tasmania was one of the 5 finalists. The award went to former Samoa Police Commissioner Egon Kyle. The police department continued to promote awareness of domestic violence and gender-based violence on the island. This year, the focus is with the private sector.
It's a day that we recognize those who have been victims of domestic violence in an effort to reduce domestic violence and bring awareness to domestic violence. So for this year, what we've asked is for businesses in the private sector to decorate their offices, their places of businesses, their shops, with some message about domestic violence to bring awareness to the broader community.
And to end the news tonight, the Water Division of the Department of Utilities are reminding people to conserve water as they continue to address water problems around the island. Government officials are asking the village councils to help convey the message to the general public and to warn those who are deliberately wasting water. Officials say that they have witnessed taps left running with running water at pigsties, while other parts of the villages or neighbouring villages, people are complaining of low water pressure. The government officials are asking that people look out for leaking taps or broken water pipes around their homes and villages and to report these to the Water Division. For the past several months, the Department of Utilities Water Division have had to attend to the problems affecting water supply around the island, and for some areas they have had to cart water using fire appliances. And that's our bulletin of BCN News for tonight. Do join us again on Tuesday next week for our bulletin in Wangahau. It's going to be a very busy next couple of weekends, so wishing you all the very best. Until Tuesday next week, nonofoa.